Rain tapped softly against the windows of Miller's Bakery on a gray Thursday afternoon in Columbus, Ohio. The smell of buttercream and warm vanilla filled the small shop, mixing with the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. It was the kind of ordinary day nobody remembers, until something happens that changes it forever. Daniel Carter stood third in line, his 8-year-old daughter Ellie tugging at his jacket sleeve, begging for a cookie from the display case. Daniel was 34, a widower for the past 3 years, and a single father who had learned, the hard way, that life doesn't wait for you to catch your breath before it throws something else at you. He worked as a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm, the kind of steady, unglamorous job that paid the mortgage and kept the lights on. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, but he was the kind of man who noticed things other people walked past. And that afternoon, he noticed her. 2 people ahead of him in line stood a woman in a faded blue raincoat, her hair pulled back in a hurried ponytail, a little boy, maybe 6 years old, standing beside her, staring at a cake in the glass case shaped like a soccer ball, with, "Happy Birthday Mason," written across it in careful blue icing. Daniel watched the woman's face as she reached the counter. She was doing the thing people do when they're trying to hold themselves together in public, shoulders squared, chin lifted, voice a little too steady. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly to the cashier, a young girl with a name tag that read Ashley. "I need to cancel the order. The one under Ramirez. For Mason's cake." Ashley blinked. "Oh, okay, no problem. Do you want a refund, or?" "No, keep the deposit," the woman said quickly. I can't do the rest today. I'm sorry." The little boy, Mason, tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, is my cake not coming?" "We'll do something else, baby," she whispered, crouching slightly to meet his eyes. "Maybe we'll make cupcakes at home. That'll be fun, right?" Mason's face did the thing kids' faces do when they're trying to be brave for their parent instead of the other way around. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on the soccer ball cake in the case a second too long. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He knew that look. He'd seen it in the mirror more times than he could count. The look of a parent doing math in their head that never quite added up, trying to protect a child from a truth too heavy for small shoulders. He didn't say anything, not yet. He just watched as the woman took her son's hand and turned toward the door, her posture apologetic, as if she owed the whole bakery an explanation she didn't have to give. Ellie looked up at her father. "Daddy, why did that boy not get his cake?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Daniel said, though a part of him already suspected. He stepped out of line. "Sir," Ashley called after him. "You're up next." "Give me 1 second," Daniel said, and walked toward the door just as the woman was pushing it open, the little bell above it chiming softly. Rain was falling harder now, and she paused on the threshold, glancing back once at the cake case with an expression she probably didn't know Daniel could see. "Excuse me," Daniel said gently. "Ma'am." She turned, startled, pulling her son a little closer instinctively, the way parents do with strangers. "Yes." Daniel hesitated. He wasn't a man who inserted himself into other people's business. He'd been raised not to. But something about the way Mason had looked at that cake reminded him too much of Ellie's face the year after her mother passed, when he'd had to tell her they couldn't afford the birthday party she wanted, and he'd seen, for the first time, his daughter learn to swallow disappointment quietly, like an adult. He wasn't going to let another kid learn that lesson today. Not if he could help it. "I couldn't help but overhear," Daniel said carefully. "I know it's none of my business, and I don't want to embarrass you. But is everything okay?" The woman's jaw tightened, the particular tightness of someone fighting to keep composed in front of a stranger. "We're fine, thank you. I have a daughter," Daniel said, nodding toward Ellie, who was watching from a few feet away, clutching her father's hand. "I know how hard birthdays can be some years. I've had years where I had to get creative too." The woman's eyes glistened, just slightly, before she blinked it away. "It's just been a rough month," she admitted, quieter now. "My name is Sarah. This is Mason. His birthday's tomorrow, and she stopped herself. "I don't need charity, but thank you for being kind." "It's not charity," Daniel said. "It's just a cake." What Sarah didn't say, what Daniel would only learn later, was that 3 weeks earlier, she'd lost her job at the dental office where she'd worked as a hygienist for 6 years. The practice had been sold to a larger corporate chain, and half the staff, including her, had been let go with 2 weeks' severance and a form letter thanking them for their service. She hadn't told Mason. She hadn't told anyone, really, except her sister in Cleveland, who had her own 3 kids and could barely help herself, let alone Sarah. She'd been surviving on savings that were thinner than she wanted to admit, filling out applications every night after Mason went to sleep, trying to keep her voice steady every time he asked when they were going to Disneyland like she'd promised 2 Christmases ago. The birthday cake, a $42 custom soccer ball cake, had felt like such a small thing to give up. But standing in that bakery, watching her son's face fall even as he tried to hide it, it hadn't felt small at all. It had felt like proof that she was failing him. She didn't tell Daniel any of this. Not that day, but something in the way she held herself, the exhaustion behind her eyes, the practiced calm, told him enough. Daniel didn't offer to pay for the cake right there. He knew, even without being told, that a grand gesture in front of a crowded bakery would embarrass Sarah more than it would help her. Instead, he did something smaller, and somehow bigger. "Would it be okay," he said, "if I gave you my number? Not for anything weird, I promise. I run into a lot of people through my job, and sometimes there are openings that don't get posted anywhere. If you're looking for work, I'd be glad to keep an ear out." Sarah blinked, caught completely off guard. Strangers didn't usually offer that. They offered pity, or nothing at all. Okay, she said slowly. "That's kind of you." They exchanged numbers under the bakery's awning while the rain softened to a drizzle. Mason peeked out from behind his mother's coat and looked up at Ellie, who smiled and said, "I like your rain boots. They have dinosaurs." Mason's face lit up for the first time since he'd walked into the bakery. "They're T-Rexes," he said proudly. For a moment, the 4 of them just stood there, 2 parents who'd both had harder years than they let on, 2 kids who didn't yet understand any of it, only that it was raining and there were dinosaurs on someone's boots. Then Sarah and Mason said their goodbyes and walked off into the gray afternoon. Daniel went back inside, finished paying for Ellie's cookie, and quietly asked Ashley one more thing before he left. "That order that just got canceled, the Ramirez cake. Can you finish it? I'll cover it, but don't tell her it was me. Just say it got made anyway, on the house, birthday week special. Whatever you want to call it. Please don't mention my name." Ashley smiled, more moved than she let on. "I can do that." 2 days later, Daniel's phone rang. It was Sarah. "I don't know how to say this without sounding insane," she said, half laughing, half crying, but someone from the bakery called and said Mason's cake was ready for pickup, that it had already been paid for as some kind of promotion. "I know that's not a real thing bakeries do. I know it was you." Daniel didn't deny it, not exactly. "I just wanted your son to have his cake," he said. "That's all." There was a long pause on the line. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice cracking in a way it hadn't in the bakery, in a way she probably hadn't let it crack in front of anyone in weeks. "You have no idea what this month has been like." "You don't have to explain," Daniel said. "I've had months like that too." They talked for almost 20 minutes that night. Not about romance, not about anything complicated. Just 2 exhausted parents comparing notes on the strange, humbling arithmetic of raising kids alone. Sarah mentioned, almost in passing, that she used to work in dental hygiene. Daniel, remembering a conversation from a job site 2 weeks earlier, mentioned that the general contractor his firm worked with had a wife who ran a growing dental practice in the suburbs, and that they were, in fact, hiring. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a fairy tale unfolding on cue. It was just one small thread of connection, offered without expectation, landing at exactly the right moment. Sarah got the job. It paid slightly less than her old position, but it came with better hours, hours that let her be home in time for dinner, in time for homework, in time for the small, ordinary moments that had felt impossible to protect during the hardest weeks of unemployment. She and Daniel stayed in touch. Not as some sweeping romance, at least not yet, not in those early weeks, but as something rarer and, in its own way, more valuable, a friendship built on the specific, quiet understanding that only 2 people who've carried a child alone through hard years can really share. Their kids became friends first. Ellie and Mason ended up in the same after-school program, a coincidence neither parent had planned but both were grateful for. There were park playdates, then dinners where the four of them sat together, then, slowly, without either of them making it a big declaration, a closeness that neither Daniel nor Sarah had expected to find again. "I used to think asking for help meant I'd failed as a mom," Sarah told him one evening, months later, as they sat on a bench watching their kids chase each other across a playground. "I thought I had to prove I could do it all myself, or it didn't count." "You did do it yourself," Daniel said. "A cake didn't fix your life. You did that. I just happened to be standing in line." Sarah shook her head, smiling. "You were standing in line at the exact right moment. That has to count for something. There's a version of this story that ends with a wedding, a house with a big backyard, a happily ever after, tied up in a bow. Maybe that's still coming for Daniel and Sarah. Life has a way of writing its own timeline. But the real ending, the one that matters most, isn't about romance at all. It's about a single dad who noticed a struggling mom trying to disappear quietly into her own hard month, and instead of looking away, the way most of us are trained to, out of politeness or discomfort or simple busyness, he stepped forward. He didn't lecture her. He didn't make her feel small for needing help. He just made sure a 6-year-old boy got to blow out candles on his birthday, and he left the rest up to her. It's about how the smallest gestures, a canceled cake quietly uncanceled, a phone number offered without pressure, a tip about a job opening mentioned in passing, can ripple further than we ever expect. Sarah didn't just get a cake. She got a job. She got a friend. Eventually, she got her confidence back. And Daniel, who had spent 3 years quietly grieving and quietly parenting, got something too, a reminder that kindness doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Mason still has that soccer ball cake photo saved on his mom's phone. Ellie still talks about T-Rex rain boots, like it's an inside joke between best friends. And Daniel still says, whenever anyone asks him about that day at the bakery, that he didn't do anything special. "I just paid attention," he says. That's really all it takes sometimes. On Mason's 7th birthday, there were 2 cakes on the table, one shaped like a soccer ball, just like the year before, and one Ellie had insisted on decorating herself, covered in slightly lopsided dinosaur figures made of green frosting. Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Daniel help Mason blow out his candles while Ellie clapped and shouted, "Make a wish." A full 3 seconds too early. Sarah caught Daniel's eye across the room, and he smiled, the easy, unforced smile of a man who no longer had to carry everything by himself. She thought back to that rainy Thursday, to the version of herself standing at the bakery counter, quietly canceling a cake she couldn't afford, trying so hard to be strong that she nearly missed the moment kindness walked up beside her. She was glad, more than she could ever put into words, that she hadn't missed it.